Hey guys, what is up? I am on today, lucky to be on today with a friend, Scott Oldford, and he's on with me today from Newfoundland. Now, Scott is a young man, he's in his 20s, and he started his first business in his teens. Now, he's had a couple of wins and a couple of losses back to back. He was telling me a story when we had dinner a few months ago about how he ended into a ton of debt and he dug himself out of it and, has built a successful business from then. He's also got a number one rated podcast on iTunes, actually two, I believe now, right, Scott?
Yeah, crazy.
All right. So, Scott, I don't want to kind of, run all over your story. I'll let you tell it. But, my audience on Total Debt Freedom obviously struggles with some credit card debt. They, in some cases, and in many cases, actually procrastinate and have some difficulty changing behaviors and getting out of the pit that they've dug themselves in. So,
Yeah.
I want you to share your story. Go as deep as you want. And I'll ask you a few questions as we go. So tell me kind of the before story, like how y'all got started as an entrepreneur, and then how it kind of went, down the toilet for you, and then how you got out of that.
Sure. Yeah. So, credit card debt, loans, all these different types of things are certainly not new to me by any stretch of imagination. I had a little bit of a different, start when it comes to being an entrepreneur and being in business. I had my first business when I was 8, and that was selling eggs. And it was just this constant basis throughout my entire teen years of just having almost a limitless amount of money, or what feels like a limitless amount of money, because of course when you're 12, what do you really spend money on? Either a gaming platform, some type of computer, or food.
Yeah.
So at around 10 or 11, I really got into programming, and I started programming for other people, and it started creating revenue. And then from there, I also hired other programmers and essentially created this network of an entire programming team. I was killing it like that for quite a few years, up until the time I was 16, 17 years old. I went through a transition period, and I know that, a lot of the times, especially when you give a teenager, someone that hasn't developed, I'll say, the frontal cortex, you give them awards and tell them that they're great and all these different types of things. And so by the time I was 18, 19, my head was, this big, and, couldn't walk into the door unless everybody was, praising me, and, all these different things that were just very, very instrumental in ensuring that I failed after, these successes. So I tried to start a startup in when I was 19 to 20. That failed. It didn't hurt that bad because, of course, I had money in the bank. The second one, and at the same time, I was doing other investments as well, small investments in the different types of things that thankfully some of them paid off.
Right.
But by the time I was 22, that was last year, 23 right now. By the time I was 22, I was $500,000 in bank debt that was leveraged against my parents' house. I'm talking credit cards. I'm talking, $50,000 in credit card debt. I'm talking, loans, lines of credit, everything besides, payday loans and, just things that were extravagant, and I just never ever attempted. They were there, and of course they were easy to get because at the time I had cash in the bank when I got that credit. So I was $500,000 in debt there, and I was $250,000 in vendor debt, with absolutely really kind of shit out of luck. I was in a business that I sold. I sold my business to another business for basically at loss, so I could get out of some other debt. It was the greener of the sides of the fields, or what it appeared to be. And I ended up accruing more debt over that time. And last June, so June 2013, I was had $600 in my bank account. I had a credit card that had $10,000 worth of limit on it. My girlfriend, fiance now, at the time extended her credit card. I got a new credit card for $12,000. And I built a company that did almost $800,000 in revenue out of those two credit cards that ended up being $22,000. Now, I had clients from day one because I brought them over from the last side, but the company that I left only did $250,000 in revenue. And so that's the story. That's sort of the background.
Yeah.
I won't go too deep into that because it doesn't really matter. All really matters is that, you know, everybody at some point, I believe, find themselves at that crossroads of, wow, I've really effed up.
Yeah.
You know, just looking back, and I remember the very moment where I was like, wow, I really flushed a lot of opportunity down the toilet.
Let me just stop
And it
for
was at a
Let me just stop you for a quick second and ask you that question. Where do you think you went wrong? Like, why do you think you know, that you effed up? Like, what was it that made things go sideways? If you could point to any one thing.
Self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage, and why do you think you self-sabotage yourself?
So I'll say self-sabotage, but it's a little bit different than what most people would say self-sabotage. I was just the wrong person. I just turned myself into, over time, over 3 or 4 years, I turned into the wrong person, and I made really stupid, you know, it was the type of situation where I might as well have flew to Vegas, took $2 million and put it on red.
Right.
That, like, I would have been more productive and had a higher chance of success if I did that at that specific time.
Right. So did you like ever stop and say, okay, I need to take a break from all this shit and just kind of regroup and rethink, and this is my new strategy going forward? Like, was there a habit change? Like, what did you do to get out of that hole that you dug? I mean, you said you were in debt for a few $100,000, you leveraged credit cards, you had mortgages against your parents' house. Like, you were in a hole.
Yeah. You know what? I think it came down to this. There was a shift, okay? There was a shift between me looking at the world and saying, what can the world give me? To me looking at the world and saying, what can I give the world?
Right.
And I started serving people instead of trying to get them to serve me. Because we all know kings serve their people, and as soon as they try to serve themselves, they're no longer the king.
I love it.
And I stole that from Chris Brogan, a good friend of mine, and it was, all I can say, it was a pivotal point where I no longer had the ego. I had a lot of humbleness. I was just a different person. It was just like all these different failures kept on taking off the onion peel, and it came down to the person that I needed to be in order to be successful compared to the person that I wanted to be. You know, I always wanted to belong. I always wanted to look bigger than I am, and all these different things. And it got me a lot of opportunities at a certain time, but then, you know, people don't want to work with arrogant pricks.
Right.
And they don't want to support and rally behind pricks, right?
Yeah.
They want to rally behind real leaders and people that are helping and that type of thing. And I think that subconsciously that's what happened. I didn't understand that until about May of this year. I didn't really think back and really look back and say, you know what, I think that this is where the pivotal change was. In terms of habits, just to talk about that for a minute.
Sure.
The biggest problem that I had is I was always, in the time that I had money, it was just the fact that I just had this I was just in the right place, the right time, had the right expertise, and that was it. Like, there was no hustle, there was no nothing.
Right.
It was just me, the fact that I just loved computers. So the biggest problem is I used to spend money based on what there was an opportunity compared to what was in my bank account and what was real.
Right.
Okay. So, and you know the problem with this that happened real quickly.
Oh yeah.
Is that you run out of money in the cash flow perspective, regardless if you get the opportunity or not. If you don't get the opportunity, you're even more screwed. So at one point, I tried having to start work up. I had 13 employees internally. So, you know, payroll was about, I think, $60,000. So we were running $80,000, probably $80,000 to $100,000 in expenses, and we were only bringing in $50,000 to $65,000 a month.
Right.
And then, of course, you toss in December when you don't make any money. You toss in a couple other months, and soon you're very, very broke. And what ended up happening, in order to get that continuing to go and trying to get more runway, I self-invested into it because, of course, the business that it was, it's not one of these that kind of is just, it's not set up to have an investor unless the investor is a partner and he's part of a company. So that's that's sort of what happened there. I will say some of the biggest habits that I've changed and had to curb is I don't eat out any longer. That is one of the biggest things that have changed, and I still don't. It doesn't matter how much money I make. The only time I eat out is when it's with other people.
Right.
Meaning other people from a business perspective.
Yeah.
Me and my fiance, we never eat out unless when we're traveling. The second thing is I pretty much have eliminated right to this day, any real personal spending on things that are out of the ordinary, unless there's a milestone. So I create specific milestones of which I will buy something, which you can see, of course, my Xbox One and PS4 behind me.
Right.
I love gaming.
We'll talk about that after.
yeah, exactly. That was a big difference, but I will say that I'm still not, and I think it's a journey, right? I think there's a journey to understand the finances. I'm looking down the barrel of being able to do $1.5 million to $2 million next year in revenue, and I'm finally having a CFO type person kind of step in to allow me to understand cash flow projections better and understand how money flows through and all these different types of things. But I think the biggest thing for anyone, regardless of how much in debt you are, it's relative to your situation. So, if I was in $750,000 in debt and I was playing with, $2 or $3 million, that's probably the same as you having a $40,000 job and being in $25,000 worth of debt. There's no real difference when it comes to $500,000 and $25,000. And regardless of the situation, there's so many different ways to be able to get out of that. And you need to be honest with the people that you owe money to. That is the biggest thing that helped me. That was probably the only reason why I didn't go to bankruptcy.
Cool.
I was honest. I called up every single person. I set meetings with the bank. I set meetings for every loan, the entire 9 yards, and said, hey, listen, this is the situation. I don't have money to pay you right now. This is how much I can pay you on a monthly basis until, this gets going. And then I was able, over the last year, to pretty much, right now, I have about $60,000, $70,000 in debt, which to me, of course, coming from where it was, is literally, relative to a $2,000 credit card.
How did it go when you started talking to them about working out new deals?
They were completely open to it.
They were,
I had people that, I remember I had a law firm that the senior partner actually called me, which I didn't even know. And he was like, listen, Scott, you don't know me, but everybody in the finance department is just, this specific person was just overwhelmed with how honest and open you were of your situation, instead of trying to cover up and hiding it and just ignoring it. And it was so true. And because of that law firm, I owed about $14,000 a law firm, right? Which they could have very easily come after me for. They're a law firm.
Yeah.
And I just finishing paying it off now, a year and a half later. And it's because I was very upfront and said, listen, I don't have the money. I don't have the cash flow to do this.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people that honestly don't care. There was a couple people that sent me collections. And you just kind of got to be like, you know what? It's really funny. There's one company, a printing company, that sent me the collections for $1,800.
Yeah.
And this was after, but there was just a miscommunication in between the finance department and the accounts department. Anyways, it's cost them about $50,000 this year for doing that, because I basically took my business elsewhere after someone sends me to collections.
Yeah.
But you just have to emotionally kind of detach yourself and try to understand and try to step in the shoes of somebody else and say, if you were them and someone came, if someone came to you and said, hey, I can't pay this bill, but I'm being honest with you, and this is how much money I have, and this is what I can do for you, and this is where you're two on my list of priorities. If you go to someone like that, there's not many unreasonable people that won't be like, okay, and if something changes, be very open and honest. Same thing, doesn't matter who it is, even CRA. I'm right now, this exact minute, just taking care of some back tax stuff from the times that when I was going through it.
Right.
And the bill's $71,000, and it's not like I got $71,000 just sitting in the bank account that I can just take. So, I called them up and I was like, hey, listen, I need to pay this over 6 months. And they're like, okay, perfect. You send in what the payment dates are, what the costs are, no problem whatsoever. And then they send out every 2 weeks a form for how much money it needs to be paid.
Right.
So regardless of what situation you're in, there's always the ability through honesty and being authentic to get past it.
Yeah, transparency is huge. It's huge. Hey, I want to be super respectful of your time because we've been on for about 15, 16 minutes now. But I want to ask you one quick question because I made a note here as you were talking, and it sounded like you've modified, a lot of habits in your lifestyle to deal with the debt and to grow your business. But I made a note here about keeping up with the Joneses, and it sounded like there was a time where you had this entitlement and you wanted to keep up with the Joneses sort of thing. Like you get the phrase in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I mean I've written articles about this stuff before. Is that what was going on?
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. People thought I was
that. Like everybody has this kind of entitlement, like me. I'm entitled to it. I got a credit card. I can afford it. I can buy it. But they don't realize sometimes, in the grand scheme. And like you mentioned, it's all relative. You could be making $40,000. You could be making $400,000 a year. If you have a credit card, then you can just go out and use it and rack it up, and you can buy stuff because we're a consumer-based society. How did you curb that? If you can give me a quick 30-second answer on that one.
So keeping up with the Joneses is a difficult one, and it's it comes down to how much you value yourself. Because if you have a high self-worth of yourself, you don't care about keeping up with the Joneses because it just doesn't really matter to you.
Yeah.
When it comes to material devices, the way that I've changed my outlook is this: I'm owned by the things that I own. And once you realize that, right now, I love my, people are always about, buying a house and all these different types of things. And, I'm great for some people. I don't have a car payment. I don't have a house payment. It's just rent. I literally can move to Australia 15 days from now. And, there's just simply, there's no attachment there to any things. You know what I mean? And when I went through everything, I had to sell the entire contents of my house, and I had a Rolex watch that I sold, all my sunglasses, all my jewelry, all these different types of things that we as people think we need to impress people that don't care, so that we feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, like there's a saying, people go to work to buy shit they don't really need to impress people they don't really like, and they end up in all this debt. So yeah, that's a valuable lesson. So Scott, if anybody wants to find you online, I mean, you've got 2 podcasts. You want to just drop the names of those if they want to, tune in and maybe learn a little bit more about some of the stuff that you talk about?
Yeah, sure. So you can definitely just Google search me, Scott Oldford, OLD, FORD, and the Limitless Business Podcast, thelimitlesspodcast.com. And that one is probably the highest value. Twice a week we talk with brilliant people, and then the other one is the Executive Minute, which you can find over at scottoldford.com, which is a daily podcast and a whole bunch of fun. So Richard, thanks so much for having me on here today. My only last words of advice, I'll call it, is whatever you're going through. It's not specifically that anyone is going through anything worse, but I guarantee you that it's not the end of the world, and that at some point it just takes time to get out of it, and just some persistence and a lot of honesty and integrity, and I guarantee you can get out of pretty much any situation.
Yeah, and actually, on that note, I'm just going to grab this here and spin it around because I want to show the audience my wall. You probably can't read it, but I've got a quote there that I hand wrote, and it says, "Success is how high you bounce when you hit rock bottom," and that was George Patton, who was a World War II tank commander. Anyway, awesome. Thanks for your time, Scott.
Wow.
I'm going to put the links to your stuff in the video, and we'll talk to you later. Okay, dude? Thanks a lot.
All right, bud. Thanks, Richard.
See ya.